What is up, guys? If addiction, recovery, sobriety is your thing, you have found the right channel. Now, this episode is myself, Susie, and Robert. Now, Susie has some experience, years in Al-Anon. Robert has a bunch of years in recovery himself, and I've been sober just over 5 years. And we are calling this the both sides. So we're getting the perspective of someone who has had the family member who was suffering from addiction, but then we're also getting the perspective of people that are now sober themselves in recovery themselves. So I hope you guys enjoy the episode. Go ahead and follow if this is something that you're into. And again, I want to hear from you guys. Put some comments out there. Let me know how long you've been sober. Let's get into it. What's going on, everyone? We are back. Another episode of the Sober Fix podcast. We had Susie on last time. We had Robert on last time. And I got a lot of cool comments from you guys and a lot of views. And it's interesting because I love doing a lot of the addiction-related stuff. But I've had questions before about Al-Anon. And like we've talked about a lot of times, and on the last time we did the show, it affects a lot of people. It's not just the person that is suffering from drinking or using, it's the family members, the spouses, husbands, wives, kids, relatives, people at work. It affects a lot of people. So I'm excited to have Susie and Robert on again. It's always a good time. I'll start with you, Susie. Check in real quick. How have you been? What's new with you?
Great. I have my youngest turned 17. That was exciting. One of my personal goals this year was to learn a new skill. So I just got back from surgical training for dental implants in Chicago. And so life is always fun learning new things.
Hey, that's cool. And I actually just fun fact, I had 2 implants done in the back of my mouth 2 weeks ago. So that was interesting. They're like, oh, it's going to be no big deal. We're going to pull your teeth and then we're going to just drill a screw into your jaw. And, oh, you don't take pain meds? Oh, have fun, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't too bad, but that's cool stuff. Robert, what have you been up to?
You know what? Speaking of implants, back in 1986, I had implanted somebody else's will, not mine, and and I got well. Crazy, crazy, crazy. And I'm so excited about what we're calling both sides, because when I originally met Susie, it was to help her husband, but Susie has helped me. She is awakened the Alanon in me. And I've been on this Al-Anon journey trying to discover why the codependency has shifted. It shifted from a substance, from alcohol and drugs and other aberrant behavior onto unnecessary attachment to others. And so, Susie, you've taught me so much, and it's so great being your friend. Susie was over at the house last weekend, and her and Lauren and I had a great time of fellowship. And it's nice living in Florida that we can grow our relationship and our friendship together. So I've had a fantastic day. I watched the guy get a 30-day chip, and I'm going to go have lunch. I'm going to propose lunch to this guy who's been sober 54 years. So on each side of the spectrum, there's an energy, there's an excitement, whether you've been sober 3 days, 30 days, or 54 years. I'm attracted to what has caused you to get into stay sober.
Awesome. By the way,
Yeah.
Laura's a great cook.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she is delicious.
54 years, Robert. Man, that's I'm still wrapping my head around that. I remember.
You know what? This guy is so cool that when I first got to the rooms, I didn't know him, of course, but when I first got to the rooms, he was taking his 15-year chip.
Crazy.
That's how sober this guy is, and it's amazing when I think in terms of what he must have gone through and the groundwork, and he let the doors, him and others like him, let the doors open for guys like me when I came in helpless and hopeless and without an idea of what to do. It was guys like Tom who said, we've got a way. This is the way that we've learned, and this is the way we're going to teach you. And so I'm forever indebted. There's another girl who goes to the same meeting. She was sober 42 years. So she was sober 3 years when I was taking my 30-day chip. And to those people, I'm so grateful. My sponsor, Will, 45 years. I'm just so grateful to the people who were here when I got here, who were on their way to getting well, because they showed me the path to wellness.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's a powerful story too. I think when you hear someone who's that many years sober and still there, still in the meeting, still showing people, look, I still do the same things
Yeah.
that you guys are doing. It's a powerful thing, and I think it kind of is like a testament to, look, you're always kind of growing, and or you're always showing up and supporting other people, or at least just even just being there. 54
You,
years, it's like,
you
wow.
know, you use the word grow, and Joe and Charlie, who are aficionados on the big book, and you can listen to them on everything AA, they call steps 10, 11, and 12. We often refer to them as maintenance steps. 10 steps 10, 11, and 12, where we take a personal inventory, we interject God, and then we go share the message. Joe and Charlie refer to those steps as growth steps. They challenge anyone to do steps 10, 11, and 12 every day and not grow, because to maintain is to stay where you're at. I don't want to stay where I'm at. I want to be
Yeah.
a better version tomorrow than I was today. And my ego said that's not possible. Reality says it is. And so I press toward that mark, the mark, from my belief, the mark of the calling of the God Most High. And that's what it says. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection, but that doesn't mean I don't aim for perfection. I don't aim for progress. I claim progress, but I aim for perfection.
Yeah, I like that. You're aiming super high, and you're going to get progress in
Yeah,
in the meantime.
because psychologists will tell you you're never going to hit the bar, so you always set it as high as reasonably possible. Zig Ziglar would say a goal needs to be attainable. So my goals need to be realistic and attainable, but if they're not higher, I will achieve lower. So if my goal is 140 and I hit 100, I'm still, instead of my goal being 80, I'll hit 60, right? So I want to aim as high as possible, being satisfied with what I hit.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I want to get into. I know Susie provided us some questions earlier. I like this one. How can I help my partner stop drinking or using, Susie?
Yeah, these are, I think the questions I shared were like, what were typical questions that Al-Anon people would ask, especially if they're new to the rooms. Most of us find those rooms just the same way I found Robert, was like, how can I help them stop drinking? And it's, in all fairness, it's the wrong question, first of all. And the answer is work on yourself. Like, the answer is I cannot care more about their sobriety than they do, and all of my quote trying and helps, terminal case of the helps, has not helped their addiction in any way. So if the choices that I've been making trying to help them have not helped, the answer is it's the wrong question. So to me, that realizing early on that this idea of control is such an illusion. It's just a total illusion. And the only thing I can control are myself and my reactions and my responses. And so learning early on that the job for me, if I want them better, is to work on me and stop focusing on them and looking at what I am doing that's adding to the problem. It's definitely one of the most common questions. I would argue that it's one of the number one reasons people go to Al-Anon. You know, whether it's a spouse, a child, they're trying to help a parent, and it's the wrong question, and that's what our rooms are for, to help you figure that out.
Yeah, and see, this is why I love doing this too, and getting the both sides perspective. It's just a whole nother avenue of kind of thinking, and like we were talking about earlier, just growth. It's just a different perspective on how to look at it, and I feel like two people though, whether it's addiction recovery or Al-Anon, it's like we're all kind of working towards the same thing, which is like this inner peace and not having kind of chaos and not having the bad cycle kind of going around. I want to ask you, Robert, as someone who Susie originally reached out to for her husband. What do you think about this question from like an addiction recovery type perspective? How can I help my partner stop drinking or using?
You know, the bottom line is you can't.
Mm,
My first two wives were incredible people. No one wanted to help me more than these women because they had so much invested in me. They believed in me. They trusted me. They wished they saw the potential in me. And no matter how much they loved me, it just wasn't enough. So even even when I wanted to, I couldn't. No matter how good they were, especially my first wife, Sue, she was an amazing mom. She was an amazing partner. She hung in with me longer than she should have, only to see me give away. And it wasn't until I was 4 years divorced from her that I pursued recovery at all. So the short answer is you can't.
mm,
That's why Susie and Alanon is so important because somebody needs to go. Well, I have a good friend, Justin, who is a member of SA, and Rico12.com is this website, Rico12.com. And Justin has a podcast live every Friday. Anyway, Justin's wife pursued recovery because she got tired of waiting for him. She said, somebody needs to get well in this family, and it's not going to be you, so it's going to be me, so I don't leave for my own sanity. And so she was smart enough, like Susie, to pursue her own wellness path because at some point somebody has to get better.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and yeah, that's what I think about that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I've never thought about it like that. Somebody out of us has to get well, and then hopefully maybe the other person follows,
Yeah.
or you're kind of leading by example. Do you see that a lot, Susie? Where maybe
Yeah, I mean,
you know,
in my case, or like in our rooms, if like let's say in my example, in this example he gave of Justin's wife, if you are getting better, there is going to become a point in the relationship where there is a tension that presents itself that they say, okay, I don't want to lose them, so I have to get better too. Or you come to a place where you're like, my wellness cannot continue to include this relationship. There's just
Yeah.
no, movement. So it's a scary thing when you love someone and you're in a covenant relationship and you're like, this is not okay. Like what's happening is not okay. It's not okay for me. It's not okay for the kids. But the goal would be the ideal, and Robert and I talk about this a lot, that both people are seeking recovery at the same time. Because if I get better and they don't, that creates this tension that possibly it can't go on. If they get better and I don't, I could cause a relapse by my behavior that's unwell. And if you're both getting better, well, that's the goal, you know.
Yeah.
yeah, and that's it, as you're kind of talking about that, it reminds me. I remember when I wasn't quite ready to get well. And I remember my parents going to Al-Anon, and it was like I was like in fear because I'm like, oh, they're gonna cut. This is when I was super young. I'm like, they're gonna cut me off. Like this is it, And it was weird though because it actually made our relationship a little bit better. I think they had all of a sudden had some boundaries. And the thing that surprised me is they actually kind of understood. I don't know if it was understood or started to just accept a little bit more about what was going on with me. I remember them going to some of the meetings and they just seemed like they got off my back a little bit and were just like and kind of just listened to me more about what was actually going on. So I bring that up because it was like what I thought was going to happen because of them seeking help. It turned out to be the exact opposite. It actually helped our relationship in the end. But Robert, I want to ask you about.
Well, let me
Go
jump in.
ahead.
My dad was sober 7 years when I relapsed. And one of the most significant Al-Anon things, my dad was not a member of Al-Anon, wasn't even a member of AA, but he got sober. And my dad dropped me off at a motel in Las Vegas. And he said to me, and Susie can relate to this, your mother and I aren't going to watch you die.
Mm.
Wow. And my dad turned around and he walked away from me. Your mother and I aren't going to watch you die. And that's true of an Al-Anon. You can't maintain sanity and watch the person you love, watch them die. You may live with them, you may not leave them, but you're not going to watch them die. So the alternative to watching them die is to go get well yourself. And my dad didn't even know what he was doing, but he did the right thing. He wasn't going to watch me die because death was the next thing for me.
Yeah, and I think, Drew, the example of your parents, it was funny. The very first time Robert and I recorded a podcast together, he said, I have met the enemy and it is Al-Anon, because that I think your thoughts are very pervasive in the community. In other words, there are people that just believe Al-Anon is where people divorce their addict, and that is so
Yeah.
not the case. I am telling you, there were only 2 people in my home group that did not stay married, 2. And so that is not the case. And I think it's a really beautiful testimony to Al-Anon that your parents absorbed enough program to recognize they couldn't change you. They could, that very question, how can I instead get my son to stop using? You can't. It's not the right question. And so they start viewing you with the humanity with which this condition, you see it for what it is, which after the first, thing, it's no longer a choice. And I think that's really cool that that was your experience with it. It means they were in a healthy fellowship.
Yeah. And jokingly in AA, the step 1 is I'm powerless over alcohol, that my life had become unmanageable. In AA, we say I'm powerless over alcohol and my wife had become unmanageable. That's still funny.
It is. It's hilarious.
I wouldn't have
Yes.
drank if it wasn't for her.
Yeah.
know?
And I told we have this saying in Alanon, like you can always spot an alcoholic by how crazy the spouse is. Oh,
Hey,
sad
these
if it
sayings, they're
works.
funny because they're always pretty spot on,
Yeah, yeah.
Another, you can tell an alcoholic, you just can't tell him much.
Yeah. I want to talk about a little bit, Susie, what just kind of the idea of Al-Anon being the enemy. Where do you think that comes from? Is it like because I remember, I don't know why I even thought that, honestly, but do you have any idea? Where would you guess that kind of comes from?
I will tell you because Robert shared it. We would reject anyone that would call BS
Yeah.
on our shenanigans. So I think the thought was if there's a group called Al-Anon that's for people who love addicts, what if they suddenly develop some sort of lens by which they're going to know that if your lips are moving, you're lying? I mean, I'll never forget when my therapist, who was at the time 20 years sober, and he would, he's like, Susie, do you know how to tell if an addict's lying? And I like leaned in for the cheat code. And he's like, if their lips are moving, I'm like, ah, that was, that was not what I wanted to hear. I was ready for the, and then because so every time I would say he's doing this, he'd say, allegedly, allegedly, time will tell. So I think the idea comes from if an addict knows, oh my word, they're going to get better, that means they're going to know when I'm manipulating, lying, that kind of thing. The interesting thing is what it teaches us is when we're manipulating and whatever, trying to change an outcome. So if they only knew.
Oh, that is interesting. So yeah, so you guys are essentially learning something that completely different than what we think is going on. What do you think, Robert? Do you have anything to add of where that kind of idea comes from?
I think it comes just from the selflessness and self-centeredness of the alcohol. On one hand, we want our significant other to get better, but not too much better. Because as Susie said, the more will they become, the less I get away with. And we've learned how to manipulate and how to twist things. And if they're not down with our nonsense anymore, then I need to either change my nonsense or I need to quit my nonsense because they're not buying the same lie. they know if they give me money for milk, I'm not coming back for 3 days. And they're not surprised when we don't show up. Where have you been? What have you done? Okay, because their expectation is equal to their wellness. The more recovered they become, this is my understanding, the less we can get away with. The less we can get away with, the more we're found out. And the goal of the alcoholic is to hide the truth about him or herself, because the Bible says you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. Well, the truth about us is it keeps us in bondage. The more truth you give me, the more I know. I mean, no one had to tell me I was a terrible husband. No one had to tell me I was a bad father. No one had to tell me I was an adulterer. I already knew these things. And so when you stop telling me, it's like, am I being figured out? And the answer was yes. Now, unfortunately, the only recourse I gave these women, Sue and Kathleen, was to leave me, because they realized that no matter what they did, I was going to be me. I was going to be the bondage, addicted Robert, and there was nothing they could do about it. Thank God they found it out. Thank God they left me while I was leaving them. I had left them a long time before. They just made it official when they physically left, but I had left them spiritually and emotionally and bankrupt in most cases.
Yeah, and that kind of makes me think of another question, Susie, and I'll ask both of you this, but I know sometimes I see people come into recovery on our end or our side, and I just see them have a hard time just kind of giving in and actually trying the program and getting honest and stuff like that. Do you ever see that on the Al-Anon side, where you've got someone that maybe they're coming in and they're constantly sharing about, their significant other and the things he's doing, but they're just not really willing to ever set any boundaries or anything like that? Do you ever see that where people, they need the help, so they're willing to go as far as kind of getting into the rooms and maybe sharing, but as far as like really implementing any boundaries or stuff like that, it's just not going to happen?
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's 100%. It makes me think of that Lego movie song, "Everything is awesome." It's like the when Robert was saying the number one goal is to hide the truth, that is 100% the same in our rooms. Everybody that comes into our rooms wants everyone else to believe everything's okay, everything's quote under control, it's not that bad. And you will only get well, like we said before, to the ability that you're able to be honest with yourself. And yes, 100% I see that in our rooms. And I think in my case, I was so desperate not to feel the way that I felt that had no problem being radically honest, just because I had been living in this, just total denial, head in the sand, warm blanket of night, whatever you want to call it. That when I was finally in those rooms, I was like, that did nothing for me except for let everything get sicker and sicker. So, the fake you's doing just fine. If you want to get real and you want something to look a little different than your Instagram highlight reels, then this is the place for you. It just is. And if you want to come in, our rooms are very healthy. Fellowships are very big on especially the members that have been there a long time, kind of reining in those venting kind of shares. Those are not what we're there for. We're not there to throw the alcoholic under the bus. We're there for ourselves. We have our own issues that need to be dealt with. So the shares about that in a healthy fellowship will be reined in very quickly by old timers, or whoever's chairing that night, in a healthy fellowship. If it turns into a rant session, find another meeting, because that is not the purity of the program. That's not what the program exists for. It's not to, throw them under the bus. It's to talk about what is going on with me. So, yes, you see that. And if the ones that get kind of quieted for that, so to speak. And they come back 2 or 3 times, and all they want to do is just say, "Can you believe this a-hole? Can you believe?" That they're not going to keep coming back. They're just not, because that's not something we participate in. That's not what the program's for. If you want to go get a therapist event, great. But that's not what our programs are for. So yes, we see it, and again, just goes back to that. Are you willing to go internal and be honest? Because if so, there is help, hope, freedom, all of that.
Susie brings up something so important, and it's the same with AA. I have a tendency to gravitate to meetings where recovery is the first language, because everyone knows how to get drunk, everyone knows how to get high, everyone knows how to lose a job, everyone knows how to lose a spouse or significant other, what have you. And so
Mm.
if if and it was said today, the newcomer is the most important person in the room. That's wrong. If you view AA or Al-Anon as the newcomer being the most important person in the room, then you view those programs as a giant furnace that needs new coals just to keep it going. If Drew, Susie, myself, others like us who have recovered don't do the best we can for ourselves and share that, there's not going to be anyone here when the newcomer arrives. And so we need to quell that as soon as possible. And that's up to you and me to do. We need to show them, look, I understand. Like, no one will, very rarely do people ever find out who my higher power is. They don't know what I drank, how I drank, but they know how I felt about it. They know that the wheels were off the wagon, that I was in despair, that I was hurting, and only a God of my own understanding could relieve me from that bondage that I found myself in. And here's the amazing thing about it. Once I am freed from that bondage, that frees up everyone else. It's amazing how my being free frees the other prisoners. It almost gives them permission to go get well themselves. And that's what we do in the rooms. That's what Susie does in the rooms of Al-Anon. That's what you do in the meetings you go to, Drew. That's what I do. I share what has happened to me, not why it happened, but what has happened. So, because that's what the newcomer needs to hear. How did you get well? How did you recover? What did you do? Because in AA and other 12-step programs of recovery, only the substance or the behavior is listed in step one. Everything else is, what did you do once you solved that initial problem? What did you do to get well? What did you do to learn how to have a professional career like Susie and raise 3 teenagers? How did you do that? I want to know, because there's power in what she's done, not power in what happened to her.
Yeah. Yeah. It changes the focus. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, I like that. And it's like and I've been to places before where and it kind of reminded me of this too when Susie was talking about maybe someone just sharing and just, ripping their spouse apart, and people got to say, like, kind of rein it in a little bit. It kind of reminds me of when I've been in the rooms of recovery and people are just, I mean, just war story after war story, talking about just drugs, this, and, how much they were, all the stuff that you were talking about, Robert, that you kind of don't even have to go into it. And then they get kind of reined in as well. And it's like, look, let's talk about like what you're doing now. We don't need to just focus on all the negative stuff all the time. So I found that interesting that happens kind of in both sides. But I think it's also a testament to just how important it is, and kind of like we were talking about, to have those people that are recovered in there and that can rein it, people that are well enough to rein it in and be like, look, like, I've been down that road, like this, let's find something more positive to talk about. That reminds me of another question too, and I'll start with you on this, Robert. How important is it, like you talked about, like, where people say, hey, the newcomer's the most important in the room? How important is it to have those people that have been sober for a long time, that have recovered, to really make sure that people are getting the right message?
That's a great question. And it speaks to the responsibility I have toward others. I've been at this 39 years, 3 months, and 10 days, 11 days. Some crazy. I think it's 14,352 days, something unfathomable for a guy like me. And I would expect you to expect me to be sober, not just sober, but be an expert in recovery. And so I do the best I can because my responsibility is so great. I don't take that lightly. I don't take the newcomer as they're nothing. They have no value. When I see young men like you, Drew, and consider I'm 71, you're young. You're a young man. No matter how you may feel tonight. You're the future of AA. And it's my obligation, it's my opportunity to instill with you. You know, when my sponsor, Jack, died, he was my sponsor for 32 years. And on his deathbed, the last day I would see him alive, I went to him, I said, what do I tell him? Because I knew he was going to pass me the mantle. And Jack said, Bob, tell him it works. And it a new fire in me. And I've been on even more on fire ever since. Tell him it works. What works? The 12 steps of recovery, the 12 steps, how to reinvent yourself, how to become brand new every single day. And it says in the big book, if you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. And unless that person is ready to take certain steps and has someone show them what the steps are, the likelihood is they're not going to get well.
Yeah, and I think it's even so important. Everything you just said is like it's so important, especially I feel like today because you got social media and you hear so many different things nowadays. And if I just scroll on social media, I will hear so many things about recovery and AA. And I heard someone today talking about how you don't need to get completely abstinent. You can go from drinking as an alcoholic and then you could like they said their therapist told them that they're able to cut it down a little bit. Just kind of things that some people may relate to, but also things that will get another person killed, or
Yeah.
or right. And so it's like you just hear so many different things, but I think it's so cool to just what you were talking about to have people that feel responsible to spread the message that they were taught, the things that actually worked for them, like your sponsor, 30 something years and saying, to tell them it works. It's just cool stuff to hear. It's cool stuff. And I think it's even more important today in a world where you could hear so many different things and it can get so confusing as to what's really helping people and what's not. Susie, I'll go to you for this next one. And when you sent this earlier to Robert and I just thought about it. I thought it was such a great question because I think it's something that a lot of people have probably done, whether it's a family member trying to figure out what's going on with, like we talked about earlier, their kid or their son, their boyfriend, their husband, their girlfriend. But it's why do I feel the need to stalk his location or look for drugs and alcohol?
Yeah, isn't that a great question? Because I I can't think of very many stories that I've heard or speaker meetings that I listened to on YouTube that didn't include this. Pre-technology, there were stories and speaker meetings about them driving all over town and looking for them at all the bars, or, now people have, all kinds of apps where you can find someone's location. Stories of, digging through the garage or under cabinets or in the closet, looking for bottles, things like that. Uh, that is an indication that you are very much focused on somebody else's activity and choices. So it's another one of those indications that you think you can control this. And one of the biggest things that we always say, I did not cause it, I cannot control it, and I cannot cure it. But I do have choices. So those are our 4 C's. So, and that you'll hear in our rooms regularly. And so I think if you would be honest with yourself about whether or not you're checking where they are all the time, or whether you're asking questions or looking for signs of use, um, you are so much focused on their choices, which you just don't have any control over. So that's another gentle reminder, I would say, to come back to yourself and work a program and figure out. Because, if, like we talked about last time, if they never get sober, how long are you willing to live this way? If your answer is I can't, then don't stop looking for all the signs and symbols and whatever. You're going to know, just focus on your own recovery, get well, get healthy, because if not, you're just going to go out there and repeat this pattern with somebody else, and you're just be looking at someone else's location and looking for signs for someone else to use. So it is one of the areas that reveals our insanity and our lives becoming unmanageable. I mean, what kind of a grown, healthy person is constantly checking their phone for where someone else is, or looking through the house like some kind of crazy robber or something? Like, that just is not the way a healthy person lives, period. It is not a sign of wellness of any degree. And so if you find yourself in those kind of things, find a meeting, find a meeting. And get a therapist that understands addiction recovery and Al-Anon wellness.
Yeah. Have you heard of the 4 C's before, Robert?
Oh yeah, I've been a friend of Susie's for a long time now.
Okay.
Yep.
That's good stuff, though. See, this is why I love doing this. I've never heard that before, and it makes total sense to me. And it's interesting too when you're talking about like someone going through their house looking for alcohol and stuff. I've never heard it from that perspective. I always have heard it where the person who's the alcoholic has hidden their alcohol somewhere, and at the last minute they're looking for it and they're ripping through all their stuff trying to figure out where they put a bottle. It's interesting to hear it on the other side where it's someone looking for, trying to make sure someone's not hiding alcohol and stuff. So that's just another reason why it's cool to see it from
Yeah. Do you remember
kind
that
of.
movie When a Man Loves a Woman that was like Andy Garcia and Meg Ryan, and she was the
Yeah.
alcoholic and he was finding, yeah, it's, if you watch that movie with recovery in you, it really hits you the ways that the addiction affected both of them. He got, practically neurotic and crazy about the whole thing, but he loved her. And then, she just kept spiraling and trying to hide it better, and stick it under the dirty clothes in the hamper, and just all the things.
Yeah, that is interesting. I want to go to this. This is the last question before I get to the other ones. It says, I'll go to you for this, Robert. Why are people why are people irritated and angry once they stop using or drinking?
Well, medically speaking, alcohol is a sedative. And when you come out of sedation, it's natural to have heightened anxiety. So that's from a medical physiological standpoint. That's how the body is. But more importantly, the brain, you have to understand the mechanics of the brain, synapses and neurotransmitters, and how they operate. That's why, and that's for a medical show. That's not this. That's why we need to redirect our thinking. That is why meetings are so important. Coffee before the meeting, after the meeting, a soda, a cigarette, whatever it takes, hold you there to find a group of people who are like you. Because one of the greatest, uh, uh, not the greatest, but the heightened anxiety is no one understands me. No one gets me. I can understand that I want to use. I can understand from a physiological standpoint and mental standpoint. But what helped me the most, Drew and Susie, you know this from an Al-Anon standpoint. Nothing will calm me more than you saying, I understand. I understand what it's like to lose your family. I understand what it's like to lose this, to lose that. I know what it's like to feel so hopeless that nothing can help you. I've been there. I've done that. Would you like a hug? And that is so powerful. Not being alone in the midst of darkness will displace all of the physical and the mental anguish that that I experience once I come out from the medication. Now, that will only hold us so long. We have to make a mental transition, a spiritual transition to overcoming that desire to drink, to use, to do other destructive behavior. But I think everything starts with someone across the room saying, boy, do I understand. Man, I remember being a newcomer. How are you doing? I can't even imagine being under that bondage, that pressure, that desire to drink or use again, or stay with that person, or to tolerate that nonsense. And so I think the fellowship really goes a long way to keeping us grounded while the plan of recovery takes hold.
Yeah, and that makes I could totally relate to that. I couldn't believe that I finally found people that understood, because
Yeah,
for so long, I mean, I felt the need to try and hide it till I got to the point where I
yeah,
couldn't really hide it anymore, but I still tried. And then it got to the point where I feel like, I didn't know who to talk to about it. And it was embarrassing. And I had all this guilt and just regret about it. But I tried to solve it all on my own. I was going to ask you, Susie, what was it like as you kind of realized, because we've talked about before about someone who, has needed Al-Anon, and they don't want people to know what's going on with, their husband or their wife. And so they kind of try and make it seem like everything's cool, maybe make up excuses for them as to why maybe they were late we talked about that. I believe, I believe it was last time. I think, we talked about that. So I was just going to ask you, it's like, how was it going in and realizing, look, I'm not the only one dealing with this. Like,
yeah.
there's other people that understand this. What did you notice that when you first came in, or did it take a little bit of time?
Yeah, one of our thing, we understand in a unique way, the way no other person can understand, including a physician, what it is like to live in an alcoholic situation. So, or, using whatever, but in my fellowship, it was an alcoholic situation. So there was something really, really freeing about that. And especially when you start working with a sponsor and like we talked about doing those inventories and things and realizing, oh my goodness, like somebody else really understands all the feelings that you have about that. And to piggyback to what Robert was saying about this is why both people being in recovery is so important, because when they are in that stage of that irritable and restless, and you don't understand or are not learning and educating yourself about what they're walking through, you could inflame a situation that you never meant to push them back to using. Not that you can cause it, cure it, whatever. But if you understand what Robert was just explaining, it gives you a whole different sort of compassion as they're recovering. And I've talked to enough longtime sober addicts that I have learned there's something magical in the 5 year mark. I don't know what it is, but Robert has said it, many other people that I'm very familiar with in recovery community that have, many years under their belt now. And I'm sure, Drew, I'd be curious if yours was similar. But there's something about that 5 year mark where you almost have to be selfish and so focused on your own recovery that it dominates a lot of, like, the same way the addiction dominated you before, this commitment to sobriety dominates a lot of your day. And if the other person isn't understanding how important that is, you can undermine, sabotage all that. There's something magical about that 5 year mark where you're able to take your eyes up and off yourself and then look at, you know, how your choices, things like that, have affected your relationships. And if you're lucky enough to have someone that hung in there with you through that, you know, that's when you're able to start looking at, hey, what am I missing here? And I remember telling Robert on one of the podcasts we did, you better have 5 years of sobriety under your belt before you ask, what amends am I not even aware I need to make? Because, we can't forget the things you don't even remember. So,
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I like that. And when did you say that, Robert, about the amends?
You know, in the beginning,
Yeah. Are you talking about you better have 5 years under your belt? I said that to him.
Oh, you said that
Yeah.
to him. Gotcha,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah.
But in relation to that, deeper amends, the most obvious amends occurred early on. But when I began looking at the totality of my sobriety at the 5 and 7 year mark, especially, to the degree that I harmed people without even maybe them knowing, I had to go back and said, this must have bothered you on this level because it's bothering me that I did this to you. And I want you to know that I'm aware of the depth of the damage that I've done. And I want you to know that I'm not that person anymore, but I want you to know that it has encouraged me to become more well because I never want to become that person again. And so I think on a men's standpoint, we ask for forgiveness on different levels. And that is why in step 10, which we're all working on in as recovered Al-Anon and alcoholics, we continued to take personal inventory and when we were wrong. So I might be sober 39 years, but as I continue to take my inventory, it may reveal something that it in year 10, year 12, year 20, that I need to go back and make a deeper, more meaningful amends. Does that make sense? So recovery never stops. It's a continuum that continues to occur until I don't breathe anymore.
Yeah, and when you guys were talking about the amends, it's interesting because I never realized how much I was affecting other people
Yeah.
until I was sober a few years. And what started to happen was I had other people that were in my drug court program. So they were in like my men's group and my counseling groups every Monday. And so I got to know all these people that were now sober. And then what would happen is sometimes, one of them wouldn't show up to the group. And we all had to go to court once a month as like a progress hearing and stuff. And what started happening is these friends that I met in sobriety were going out and I was getting a firsthand look at kind of the chaos that was entering their life right after they went back to drinking and using and it was so bizarre because I mean I feel bad for them that that's going on, but at the same time I feel even worse because I'm starting to see like what people were dealing with me, where they had no idea where I was and so I really got a taste of even more amends that I really needed to make. And I just a better understanding of how I was affecting people out there because I was just looking at it from a different perspective, I guess you could say. I was seeing it from, the kind of the viewpoint that my family
Yeah.
members used to see. I was witnessing, it was basically, I'm watching what's going on with them, but I'm witnessing myself years before. It was weird. It was eye opening, but it was bizarre.
Before you go on to the next question, Drew, and forgive me for interrupting, but Susie said something so important, and I'm going to use the word communication because if you're fortunate enough to still have your significant other in your life, no matter what side of the table you're on both sides, am I as honest with that significant other as I am in the meeting? The meeting isn't a dumping ground like we're talking about before. I need to bring that mentality into my home. And I need to tell Laura, although I was 2.5 years sober when Laura and I met, but I still need to say to her, honey, I'm afraid. I don't know if I can do this. I have some anxiety here. I'm afraid there. I think I treated you badly here. AA is not where I go and release the information. AA is where I go to display what I do. Susie's been in my home. She knows how I am. And she can come into an AA meeting, which I was a speaker one time and Susie was at, and Susie and I have done podcasts together. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a consistency, Susie, in me. You see me in my home. you know, you see me in the recovery community, and they have to be similar. Otherwise, why are you this person there, but you're that person there? Or why are you this person here and that person there? There needs to be alignment in who we are. I can't I can't show one phase to the Easy Does It group where I go to my noon meeting and be a different person when I get home any more than I can be a different person at home that I show. Does that make sense? So communicate is so important because I think we're only as sick as our secrets. And when I share my feelings, my wants, my hurts, my joys, my victories, as well as my fears, my concerns, my weaknesses, then I'm well. And so is the other person.
Yeah, it's like it reminds me of kind of like just transparency,
Yeah, yeah.
or it's and it took me a little bit to get there, because even when I remember when I was suffering, still drinking, still getting high, I always had nothing was transparent, right? Because I'd be telling people, "Oh, I'm fine. I got this under control," but I was anything but fine. And so I like that you guys talk about that. It's just like it's kind of the contrary action to what I was doing in addiction. It's just being consistent with people, and no matter how I feel, letting them know, and not having kind of these different sides of me where, oh, I'm portraying things are good over here, but then I'm suffering over here. And yeah, I like that. Thank you for adding that. I want to ask. There was one of these questions that I had over here. It was about control. I don't see it. Oh, it says. I'll ask you this, Susie. I'll ask both of you. But how has your idea of control changed since getting into recovery?
Actually, that is one of my favorite blogs I ever wrote for Robert. Maybe top three was one that I did on control being an illusion, because there 180 switch. I mean, it couldn't be more opposite. I think when you are living in an active addiction situation, there are so many aspects of your life that are like you can't manage or can't control, that then you hyper fixate on the things you think you can control. And I've shared this story many times in either blogs or podcasts where, my kids pointed out that I was so controlling. And I just remember this light bulb going off in my head, like, you think I'm the crazy one? Are you kidding me? And that was they had no idea how convicting that was to me. And that's one of the things that drove me to know that I needed help. Like, if you're telling me you think I'm the crazy one, like, we got something is wrong, and it is me. And so that one thing alone is what has changed the most for me. And it's interesting because 8 years in, with my children all becoming young adults, they thank me for not being a freak out mom. I don't have Life 360 on any of their phones. They were the only kids in high school whose parents were not constantly. And I said, look, you know, when I was growing up, my mom didn't get an alert if I went 4 miles an hour over the speed limit. And when I arrived somewhere, whatever, I'm like, we have to do this thing from a place of trust. And if you break that trust, there's going to be consequences. But I'm not going to treat you as if you've already broken that, on the front side. And it's just been so healing. Like, it is a better way to live. I am not trying to hyper control my kids or overmanage them. And because of that, they've consistently I allowed them to make decisions that were age appropriate for them. And because of that, amazingly, three kids that are totally at risk by everything that research and psychiatry would tell you about their lives. They are completely at risk. Not one of them has made a choice that has required me to intervene. Isn't that incredible? I mean, that's and it's not because I have my head in the sand anymore. It's because they have been given these age appropriate ways to show up and see me stop, pulling in the reins. So they don't have to feel like they have to go run off and express themselves or be free. It's just so interesting. The same way that you have all watched families where the parents are hyper controlling and the kids go off to college and they lose their ever loving minds. Well, it's no different with addiction. You become this hyper controlling spouse that's doing all those things you asked me on that other question, checking their location, whatever. No, that's not a healthy environment. And it creates the same kind of pushback. Like Robert always uses that law of, for everything, there's an equal and opposite, reaction. And it's the same with that idea of control. I know now, I'm very clear that what I can control are my responses, my reactions, and my choices based off what other people decide to do. They are going to do and be exactly who they are. And I can observe that. I'm not going to change it. And I can just decide, do I need a boundary there? Do I need to allow them access to my life or not? I mean, that is just a better way to live.
Yeah, that's a really cool way just to put all that. It's a lot of points that it's just cool to hear, and I like how it transfers over so much to our side of addiction recovery as well. It's like I tried to control everything. I want to ask you too, Robert. How has your idea or concept of controlling, your life or anything, your alcoholism, how has it changed since getting into recovery?
I think Susie's answer serves both sides of the table
Yeah.
perfectly. And the only thing I would just restate something that she said. They taught me early on, it's not what they say, it's not what they do, it's how I react. Because, and that's all I'll say. I think she had the perfect answer.
Yeah, I like that. And I don't know, it just took me a very long time to realize that. Even when I put the drugs and alcohol down, I was still so controlled by outside things and I just I felt like I had no time to think things through and kind of give myself a little bit of a pause to react to stuff. And it got better as I kind of stayed in geared towards recovery and I just kept kind of just showing up and trying to grow a little bit like we talked about earlier each day. It started to get better. Thankfully it's better today, but I do remember for so many years just reacting to life and it used to get me in a lot of trouble. I remember being at work and something would go wrong and I'd say something I shouldn't have. Or I remember being in early sobriety and I was stressed out at work and I like walked out and quit and it was so embarrassing. I had to like go back. I had to go back in like 10 minutes later, but that's how my life was. I just didn't have, I tried to control everything and it never worked in my favor. So I could totally relate to what you guys said. I'll ask one last question here. Let's see. Let's see. I'll start at you, Susie. In what ways has Al-Anon improved your relationship with yourself?
Has it not? It is the single biggest reason why these principles matter to live with for the rest of my life. And I think it's really interesting. To me, the steps were very much about my relationship with myself. The traditions were about my relationships with everybody else. And I think the traditions, more than anything, affected in such a good way my relationships with my children, my relationships with my coworkers, as a boss, as now an employee in a corporate dental setting. It's Yeah, I would say there is no way in which it has not improved it. And like going back to that last question, how it tags into this, like 90% of my amends were about my reactivity, and not taking a chance to process the thing. And like we talked about last time, that's a thought. Let me look at that. Let me examine that before I respond. So I think that this has improved every relationship in every way. What it did is also reveal that there were relationships in my life that had to be pruned. They're just, when you get to a place of wellness and you walk by these principles, it doesn't mean that every relationship is going to stay intact. There are people that need you sick to have a relationship with you. And that is really important to recognize. So there are people in relationships right now that might listen to this, that they have a person in their life of significance that isn't in favor of their wellness. They don't, like let's take an Al-Anon that's not ready to get better. Then they don't want the addict to get better, because then they're going to have to look at their life's unmanageable because of themselves. And what do I have to look at in myself? So the short and long answer is every single relationship is improved, even if it means that I will no longer participate in a relationship that is not better or well, then that's a better relationship with myself.
Yeah, and the way that you said, not everyone wants, to see you get well, and that's it's very interesting, and I've found it true in my experience as well. And it's what about you, Robert? Has that ever shown up in your life, or can you relate to that? Do you think what would you say about not everyone really wanting you to get well? Sometimes it changes the roles in the household. Sometimes it changes roles in relationships. What do you think about that?
I don't, um, because I I can't please. That was my problem. I was trying to please so many people. It was Drew. It was so tiring. I was exhausted. I had to drink just to calm myself down so I didn't blow my freaking brains out, right? And so, no, I drank for other reasons, but that didn't hurt. Um, I was so tired of trying to be all things to all people at all times that when I just found out I just had to be sober, and just by being the sober version of Robert Pardon, I was automatically a better person, a better father, a better husband, a better friend. Uh, People, you wouldn't believe it. People actually wanted me to come back to work.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
crazy, huh?
my mom and my dad, they were excited when I came over. You know, um, friends and families and you name it. And I tell people all the time, there is not a part of me that isn't better because of the 12 steps of recovery and practicing the principles in all my affairs. Everything I am, including why I'm the husband that I am, I owe to the plan of recovery, because outside of it, I'm lost. I really am lost. It's like an architect without a blueprint. All they have is how the building should look. They have no idea how to build it. They have no idea what goes underneath the footings and the foundation and the structure. They can't build a building without blueprints. And the plan of recovery is my blueprint for being the best possible version of me that I can possibly be to this day. That's why I'm so looking forward to tomorrow. I'm excited about tomorrow. If God gives me another opportunity to be this well, how well can I be tomorrow? Who can I influence tomorrow? I don't even know who they are yet, and I'm already excited about them. But that's the program of recovery.
Yeah, I love how you guys answered both of those questions. I think we should finish it at there. We've gone over an hour. I just want to say, you guys, thanks again. Anyone listening, we thought it'd be a great idea to do the both sides, both perspectives from Al-Anon, from addiction recovery. And it's, what I find as we go through a lot of this is there's so many things that would help both sides. And there's so many similarities, so many goals, so many similar experiences of stuff that we've gone through. So thank you guys. Thank you, Susie.
Thank
Thank you, Robert. Thanks for taking the
you.
time
Thank you.
to come on again.
Thank you.